What this, I think I'm ready to begin. What this presentation is going to be about is to see, ultimately, it was to see if there was anything here. I wanted to go to a high school that was geared for tourism in Italy and see if their curriculum had anything to offer our school. The reason being that we have a school that's in a beautiful setting with mountains available and a lot of tourism, coastal, charming villages, etc. We have some issues that we care about, like sustainability and keeping it that way and not having it diluted by commercialism and whatnot. And I wanted to see if, where there's a high school that's specifically geared to tourism, what are they offering their students? What do the students want to learn? Is there anything that we can take from that and begin a dialogue? Maybe even pave the way for some kind of exchange, or just to see if there is some opportunities for exchange for maybe another place in Italy. And I've always loved all things Italian from way, 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 way back. Some of the prep that I did for this trip was to teach myself Italian by using Pimsleur language tapes in my car on the way. Beth gave me a CD. Many years ago, 30 years ago, I went to cooking school, and one of the curriculum was about Italian food, and so I had to embrace that early on. I got out some of my old books and studied up on Italian food. I studied up on Italian wine. I just did Lita Ball and I went to the North End a year before, and I practiced some of my Italian there. So that's just, was a life dream for me to. I'd been to Italy once before in my 20s, but I wanted to go again. And this girlfriend of mine said in a year before, she mentioned wanting to go to Pompeii, and I said, "Are you kidding? I've always wanted to go to Pompeii. I'm channeling my bathroom through Pompeii in my bathroom." But I can vouch that I've tried to decorate it so it looks like the red of the Villa of Mysteries. I'm attracted to that, not the Renaissance art and the ancient art, but the more primitive art. So I really love many things Italian. So that's kind of was the personal impetus, and then for fitting it into the job, that was the angle. And I also wanted to see if there were some curriculum applications that we could use here at the high school. There's definitely some that lend themselves to a social studies curriculum, but there's some for science, and I have prepared some presentations that are more photogenic, and they're good for armchair traveling, or if you can see a curriculum application, great. I'd be happy to share it, come and do a little spiel, whatever you like. So that's kind of the idea behind this. So I told you about the grant. This, I had a funny experience, which was, told you about, another thing to prepare is a lot of hiking and walking to be in shape, because it is very steep, really steep, Costa Rica steep in some cases, just quads of steel, calves of steel, to get in shape to do this, like 5 miles a day. When I went to this high school, here's the high school. It's funny because maybe you can read it, I don't know. I wasn't able to translate these two pieces of curriculum. It was very difficult for me to get curriculum. And I was kind of baffled why. So I had arranged through a tour guide, the Italian-speaking person who we initially set up with, not the tour guide who worked with us once we were there, to contact somebody at this high school in the town of Amalfi. And he hooked me up with a teacher who spoke English, and she and I had a preliminary dialogue. And I let her know that what I really wanted was curriculum. The day that I showed up, I figured out how to get myself by bus, which was exciting, from one part down the coast to the school. I met her, and I felt like a visiting dignitary, which was very nice. But she kept on saying to her colleagues that she ran into something about the headmaster. The headmaster, yes, the headmaster is here. So part of the trip was me meeting the headmaster. That felt like that was for somehow to her political advantage, to, you know, look at this liaison we're doing or something. The headmaster was so much makeup, big hair, so much lipstick it was running in the creases. And she said something about Maine, and what she remembered was Angela, Murder, She Wrote. And I, you know, reiterated how I was wanting the curriculum, but there really wasn't a whole lot of simpatico here, so that's fine. I ended up going to my host teacher's classroom. She asked me not to speak Italian because this was an opportunity for those students to learn English and try it out. And so fortunately I had bought a stack of postcards from our area and some photographs to just, you know, establish similarities and differences. And I passed them around. I answered some questions. And I ended up teaching 3 classes.
I think that happened to several of us in Costa Rica at different times.
So, as riffing off of how she wanted to use me, which was different than what we had talked about, I sort of shifted a little bit to asking the students what they wanted to get out of their curriculum, which was really good, you know, and that I think is something we could find useful. What they wanted was, and I do, you know, I do understand some of this. There's a grid that they have a different system in that they have one high school for the classics, another for the sciences, another for language, and then this is for tourism. And they have these grids of what classes you're required to take, what credits you need to earn and what. And one can compare that to what they think for the tourist application. So that's interesting. But what the students said that what they wanted was they wanted to learn other languages, and not just English. And it's an international population. And they wanted to learn about the cultures of the other place. And they wanted to be able to understand what it's like to go to some of the places that are being promoted. So one student from one class had been on a cruise. Another student went to Capri. Another student went on a boat ride somewhere, which seemed like a relevant, common sense, sure, you know, and I could see that being something that would be fun. And of course, for a lot of this, I did have the Island Pathways type kid profile in mind. That was last year before the program was up and going. So I did work out a curriculum that I thought would be relevant for our application here. And here it is.
Becky,
You're bumped off again.
Oh,
when it went to sleep.
okay.
She needs caffeine.
Library.
Or you can set it so it doesn't do that.
Sorry. Have a snack.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If you.
Hey, there you go.
This library is notorious for giving you.
I'll just let you go. Oh, okay. No, thank you.
Alright, there's a way.
All right, let's jump in the next one, and I'll riff at that point. More riffing, right? So for example, this was one approach, I was really trying to establish a lot about the similarities and the differences, down to like looking at the kids, and there were quite a few per classroom, like 25, 30, and they're beautiful, many of them. Most of them, I remember being struck by that impression and extending that compliment to them. But the boys had hairdos, many of them, that was just this, you know, kind of Elvis sticks straight up here and then go back. And I remember, you know, other than there being a lot more dark-haired kids, though not exclusively, that was the main difference, that they had this do. The boys had this different do than the do we have here, certainly in northern New England anyway. And you know, I remember there'd be some sassy girls who, you know, any tricks that I might use here for dealing with that kind of student there same thing without the, so it was kind of fun. And it was fun for them to see the similarities from the postcards and have that generate some questions. So looking at our geography here, specifically the geography and identifying what is it, making that connection about the glaciers and the mountains that result. I mean, some of this I know is like 5th grade curriculum, but it, or maybe middle school, but it, but then really tying it into how it affects the economy here and getting into that. Showing how tourism specifics that are directly linked to business in places, so Thunderhole, Sand Beach, Cadillac Mountain, Beach Mountain, all places that are, the main point is the geography. And then businesses that draw that connection between the land and the economy. So for example, Eddie Monet's underwater business, that's, you know, an obvious thing. That would be cool to visit it and see it through that lens. Kayaking businesses, restaurants with local foods, boat excursions and whale watching. Field trips to take kids to these places so that they can solidify the geographic information and make it more real and concrete. Notice the science if it's relevant, because obviously the geological connections, the effects of glaciers, the layers of rocks, the types of rocks, understanding the volcano. In this situation, it was limestone, and the difference in the mountains here and the mountains there is fascinating because it's so steep and not worn down by a glacier. It's quite striking, and you know, that's interesting. So reflecting on the economic implications, pros and cons. This one in particular, and this comes from working with so many students who are aligned with lobstering, and they can't be bothered. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. They don't. The whale protection laws irritate them, and it's difficult to reason with them about why we have those laws, and it's a very pithy, worthwhile question. I'm sure that there's a new Common Core standard there, you know. That is not one thing I did on this, by the way. I did not identify the standards till I'm sorry. You can't imagine why, right? But are the regulations that protect whales fair and invite, I think having scientists and fishermen perspective in for a dialogue, much like the book Secret Life of Lobsters, would be important and fruitful for any class. So, you know, other economic, how do people make a living here? Why establishing the connection to the land and the geography of the place again? And not ruling out stewardship organizations. How do they fit in? We have so many nonprofits here, so much stewardship. And that plays a role in the economy because of the place, the special place that we live. And I think that's an element that's important to bring up as well. So then what I think the real pithy part is the sustainability and understanding what sustainability is. From an environmental standpoint, that's one thing, but from a social and cultural point of view, you know, do you want to keep the charm? What is the charm? Or do we want to keep it? How do you keep it? How do you keep it from getting diluted? And also from an economic point of view, some of that charm sells. So how, you know, what implications is there if you have a strip? Why do we not let McDonald's in here? All those seem like relevant questions for kids to dig into. And what would our life be like, and our economy be like without our tourism? And I think that looking at what happens to lobster from here as a way to engage some of our kids who, I've heard kids say, oh, we should just blow up the bridge and sort of leave them alone to do their lobstering and blow up the bridge and get rid of the tourists. And they haven't made the connection. And I know. Well, and you know,
we're all going to buy all their lobsters. We don't need the tourists for any of it.
We'll just ship them to, by boat. So I think following the web of the jobs, you know, as far as Boston, New York, seeing what happens to the Maine lobster and how much our economy is contingent upon that is a worthwhile activity. And then bringing that further from there to the global. What other tourist destinations have these same issues? Obviously, on the Amalfi Coast. What, though different, you know, but some similarities. What can those places do, and what can people do locally here and globally? And you'll see that the 5th item, standards that align. I don't have to do that, so, but I sympathize. But, so I've made some links that I think are fun, and this is the armchair travel part of the presentation. Similarities and differences, I think, is a nice way to begin, because it sort of rips off of this curriculum I've just shown you. An overview of the architecture in Pompeii, from Pompeii and now current day, because that's kind of neat how similar they are. You can see that. Some of the cultural aspects, the hikes, the hike itself, and that's, I played with a couple of different photojournalistic software tools that Mark had offered in his journalism class, and the last two are examples of that. And then since I mentioned this to the faculty about a month ago that I was going to be doing this now, and a couple people expressed an interest in the plant material, which I personally really, I'm a botanist at heart, and that was part of my love for doing this and wanting to explore that. I've made a presentation about the botany. That is not linked yet, but I'll share that if we have time and if anyone's interested. But I'm going to do it for Jen Riefler and possibly Jen. So, anybody want to? I mean, stop. Feel free to.
I had a question.
Yeah.
What was, like here we've got there's the lobstering, and then tourism sort of came later, or simultaneously. What's the industry? Is it fishing? Is it a fishing village?
No,
originally?
there is some charm in there is fishing there.
Mm.
That you see these beautiful, colorful fishing boats, which you'll see, but it's not on the scale that is obvious here.
Uh-huh.
The amount of hotels and businesses around vacationing on the Amalfi coast in beautiful hotels and going out to Capri and
So it's been kind of a tourist place
yeah.
from the get-go.
I wouldn't say from the get-go, but I would say, I don't remember off the top of my head whether it was like a 1930s discovery or what, but it is had become, some parts of it have become like a glamour spot, like Positano
Right.
is that way. Whereas Amalfi is a little more, it's definitely highly visited by tourists, and there's the Tinseltown aspect of in the town square, but I don't think it has the glamour that some of the other places have.
Mhm.
There's a little more ordinary life around. Well, actually, there's ordinary life everywhere, just crawling up the hillsides. And there's a lot of wildlife as well, not animal wildlife, I mean, but sparse areas, but it's amazing how much humanity is tucked into so many places and without roads, that the in some cases, old trails. So, so both places are beautiful coastal tourist destinations. This is the view from our hotel the first night we were there. We were served a glass of wine, and I just turned to my friend and I said, I am so happy. And when I need to go to my happy place, this is where I go. It was just, I couldn't believe I was there, and it was just lovely. So Bar Harbor in high season, and Amalfi just getting started in April, and that it would be when they begin. Fishing there, a beautiful, a colorful boat. That looks pretty similar. That's Sorrento Harbor. Lots of boats pulled up on the shore. I saw that a lot. Not moored. Positano has a building code, and the town only allows certain paint colors on the buildings to preserve the charm. This is not coming through quite so well, but it's sort of this nice pink and yellow, pale coral, white, cream, and that's the wash of the town. The coast, as you can see, an idea of the slope. Main coast and the comparison of the glaciers. Bass Harbor.
Solmesville has a color code. Nobody is allowed to paint anything except white and gray and black.
Yeah.
I'm actually just kidding, but people have
Right, yeah.
people
that's
have joked
always
about trying to buy something in the middle of
Well,
Solmesville and painting it bright orange or purple or
Yeah,
something.
I mean, there are
Yeah.
towns that have code enforcement officers for some of that kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, but there's a connection there. So
There's a lot. There would be enormous public pressure if anybody
Yeah,
tried to
it's
do
all
something that was,
Yeah, or
out
an
of
original
Paige has a
Victorian.
yellow house.
Pardon?
Paige is the
Page's house
wild.
is yellow.
She's the wild woman.
That's an original color though, I think.
Yeah.
It is, and it's not that wild. I mean,
Yeah.
it,
No.
it still fits in
Yeah.
the village look.
So at this place, here's some, previously, here's lobster pots. I never figured out what these were, what kinds of, I think they might be octopus, but, yeah.
Wow.
And the boats are lovely, very colorful, hold up on the side. Hiking trails here, Amalfi Coast hiking trails. Our mountains had a glacier smooth them down, and they're made of granite. Their mountain, now that one really just, look
Wow.
at that. Isn't that awesome? The difference between their mountain range and ours. And your friend Becky was hiking that. I mean, it was serious slope. So their mountains are made of limestone, and they lie along a fault line between two tectonic plates. The land and ocean plates came together, volcanoes formed. That little formation is called the Hole, for obvious reasons. Caves you see everywhere, and the land's got a lot of erosion, earthquakes, rocks that are different from the ancient volcanic rock of MDI, kind of crumbly, and of course that affects the vegetation. Mount Vesuvius is nearby in Naples, and this Mount Vesuvius, look at this, I made this partly for kids, so I know you guys know this, but it's the volcano that destroyed Pompeii. And I will take a moment for a accessory point of view. This is a necklace from the, those of you who know me know well how important that is. So these are from Mount Vesuvius. This is lava
Oh.
from Mount Vesuvius, I think. And there's it's not like this is an endangered thing like coral. It's, so I could have it with good conscience. Note the slope on that. And there's my friend in front on the this woodland trail. Woodland here, woodland there. And so these global issues, can these two coastal communities preserve what's unique? Or will the pressures of more commercial development and increased tourism change their character? And how can each community preserve what is special but adapt as necessary?
Those were the same questions at some forum Acadia's having its centennial, and I didn't get to the forum, but those were listed as those same questions, like how do we encourage more people to get out and see this place, but also keep it from getting trampled to death.
It's a very human ecological question too. And then there are links for more, specifically environmental threats on the Amalfi Coast and on the Maine coast. So it felt like if a student were interested, these would be some resources for where to go with that. So another angle is the architecture. I'll take you to Pompeii. You don't have to come to my bathroom to see it. It's more thorough here. It's funny, when I got there, I had a few moments inside this gate where it was like I felt a moment of peace in Mecca, like that I'd come to a Mecca. I finally made it after all these years. It was really short-lived because there was we went a little further, and just the throngs of humanity, the crowds, really diluted the experience for me, unfortunately. But it's still very special. And let's see, is that not? I'm not sure why that's not advancing, but. Okay. So Villa Ruffalo, at its peak in the 13th century, was a blend of Arabic, Sicilian, and Norman architecture. One of these maps show how much ground we covered. If you picture, let me do a point. Like, if this column is the boot, okay, right about here is Naples. 2/3 of the way down, maybe 3/4, before the boot goes out. And there's this little place where the coastline cuts in, which you don't see on a big thing of Italy, but you see it in the Campania is the province where this is. And the Amalfi Coast is on that place where the coastline cuts in before it comes down again. And I would say I hiked about half of it, maybe. So the far right town that I started in, it was Ravello, which was beautiful, and one of Wagner's operas took place there. That's definitely was a movie star destination. And there's some beautiful architecture there. And one place was Villa Ruffalo, which included this cloister for reflection as you walk through, and you see this architecture of the Moors, Moorish. In Amalfi, this is their Santo Duomo or cathedral. This is in Ravello, the domed roof holds sand in that to cool it in the summer and hold in heat in winter. Sometimes they might paint the dome black to hold in more heat, to attract heat. The stucco buildings snuggle up to the coast. Old and new, side by side. That's the ruins of an ancient paper mill next to the trail that takes you into the Valley of the Mills. And this is a home that's a lemonade business right on the side of the trail. These are the abandoned old Amalfi paper mills, so they made back in the day, with especially taking advantage of all the rushing water coming down the ravines.
How old? Like 1700s, 1800s?
No, I knew that, but it's escaping my mind right now. Ask me a plant name and I'll remember it, but not dates. But I want to say 1300s.
Oh, like super old.
Yeah.
Ooh.
But I could be
Cool.
entirely wrong, so I'll get back to you on that. These steps on the left, very, very common. And pound going down those steps, very painful. And people do it all the time. This is their walk to work. So in Pompeii, this one that's where my moment of peace in Mecca, I've arrived on the right is, that's my friend. But then in the left, that's the inner courtyard of Pompeii. We don't need to read this now, but that's if we use this for a class. But that's actual footage. I know you've seen this in books, right? But here it is. I have pictures of the dog. It's so sad. This is one source said this was the oldest existing building of its kind, the oldest amphitheater in the world. 20,000 people could be seated here to attend shows of gladiators and wild animals. I'm not saying it is, but one source credited it with that. The Villa of the Mysteries, another one of my meccas, with this gorgeous colors and treatment inside, and I couldn't get close enough with the crowds. So these pictures don't do it justice in the lighting with the camera. But the geometry and the classic Greek key border pattern. That was it. This one was interesting because the black background, whereas these colors are more, especially that red, are more common.
Becky, what is the significance of this place?
The Villa of Mysteries. I believe that it was a wealthy landowner's home, and some of the rites or customs, festivals, not for everybody, but for guests, might take place there. That room in particular shows some of those types of events. Actually, I have over here a couple of resources that go into detail about Pompeii and Herculaneum or Herculaneum, and that would explain more about that too. I've got, I think, 2 sources about Pompeii and 2 about Herculaneum. This village is more well preserved because it was covered by lava that solidified from Mount Vesuvius, and it's below ground. And a lot of the homes still have their roofs on it, so that intimacy that's created by having a roof over your head was noticeably different than what you might have felt in Pompeii, where you didn't have a roof. felt more like ruins, whereas this was a little, even though it's the same time period.
Mm.
That, I mean, that's sort of one of those examples of the power of architecture to have those subtle differences felt. Now, in the next slide, this was cool because the diagonal brickwork the way they put together bricks, not horizontal but diagonal as well, was deliberate and known back then as a way to deal with the stresses of earthquakes. They were laid so that they're more resistant. And this, we also traveled in Naples and looked at this ancient city that was there below ground, where there were many examples of that. You see it in that middle range above the way that the bricks are laid there. And that was interesting. The sidewalks have chunks of bright marble in them that acted as reflectors, so it was like an ancient path light. Isn't that cool? Yeah, that's my shoe for scale.
In good scientific tradition.
Yes, like we like that scale
We do. We like having something in there to give it scale.
to make it relevant too. So here's a home with a courtyard. You can see what I mean about the intimacy and how you can imagine that. These beautiful tiles in the men and women's bathrooms. I'm sure we've seen this in our textbooks, haven't we? So this was I stood in front of this mosaic made from over 1.5 million tiles. My camera lost its battery in the Museum of Naples. It's very sad, but I got a couple before I went out.
It was overwhelmed by the beauty.
Yes, and the many erotic paintings or sculptures, it's sort of funny that, well, it's a memory, that's it. This is a room in the women's baths. Garments, you could see the cubbies. And people could sit here and get warm. They had a furnace nearby with water that you could draw, so it was very technologically savvy. And here's a glass paste mosaic of Neptune and Aphrodite. This was interesting because to me it looked kind of had a Middle Ages. It was evocative of the Middle Ages as well as this time period to me. Then this is creepy. Those crypts where you still see bones.
The whole thing was completely glued shut with
Yeah.
this volcanic ash that then had lava on top of it. So they had thought for years that the population actually survived because they didn't find any dead bodies anywhere. And then when they started excavating this, and it was like concrete, trying to drill through to get into those. And this would have been the perfect place to flee. And probably some people did make it to boats and get
Yeah.
out into the water, but if the explosion hadn't been quite so bad, that would have been the perfect safe
Yeah.
place
Yeah.
to have gone.
The
Um,
people were trapped there.
But the people ended up being trapped and they all died. It's Roman remains were cremated, so this is a really unusual find because it's everybody from rich to slaves, and all of their jewelry and their lamps and the things they carried with them. It's amazing.
Their material culture.
Yeah.
I can never even fathom how quickly and how much ash must have fallen
Yeah.
to stop people in their tracks
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that, Like I can't, my brain doesn't.
The,
Wouldn't you know
this-
that was coming?
The
No, because it was
proximity-
blowing in the other direction.
the proximity of this right here to the ocean, to the shoreline, is interesting because now it's much, much further away.
Mm.
But here, it's much closer, it was much closer then.
So was the coastal front right there, is what you were
Yeah,
saying? It was
quite
right
nearby.
there. The water was right
Yeah.
up to
It
there.
was probably because this was an area that exported,
Mhm.
this is from the days of teaching geology as part of IPS. I love this material and we often included some stuff on this.
Let me go back to that
Yeah.
just because I know some people are gonna leave it, so if you don't mind.
Yep, not at all.
Okay, so that's then, and here's now. I mean,
Wow.
look at that similarity.
Mm.
That's Positano, that's Herculaneum, with Naples surrounding. Pompeii and Positano now. City Streets of Pompeii, of Amalfi. And that's, one on the left is Praiano, the one on the right is Amalfi. And that's that.
Where did you get so many fabulous pictures if your camera died?
Oh, that was just at the Museum of Naples that it died.
Oh, wow.
So, now if any, since there, would you like to see cultural keynote, or, I mean, if people are, some people have to leave, I'll give you a choice of which I go to next, I'll just keep going, but if the photojournalism, another way to tell a story, or the hikes, that's a little different. Here, or just keep going? Oh. I heard somebody say culture, I'll just jump into that one and I'll go quickly through it. So, that's the end. So what I covered with the culture is the neighborhoods, ways that people make a living, businesses, agriculture, pets, foods, and local color. So this is, I loved seeing this there in some houses, how they paint directly on the house. So if somebody's making wine from grapes, and this might be on homes, it might be on businesses. This was on this, a trail that again was like a local street, but it was just steps going down, and here's, you know, someone's, it's like the driveway, but it's not, it's the walkway into their home. So you're right by someone's home, often. This man has just walked up many steps with a burro loaded up with clay vessels. Amalfi, look at the, on the left, the limestone cliff right behind you. It was so close by. And it's like the Bar Harbor of the region where it's a little more ticky-tacky, filled with tourists. Lemon trees everywhere on the slopes. The netting, which is either black or green, protects the lemon trees, creates like a greenhouse effect. And here's this wonderful, this is like my Facebook friends will recognize this. When we were really tired and hot on this trail, we came upon this lemonade stand out of the blue. It's just lovely. Another time we came at the end of the Path of the Gods. These folks had great location, and this was a business, like a little cafe run by this man and his daughter. Here it is on the outside. It's the first place you come to when you get done with that path.
Oh.
The snack. The one on the right was mine. First a snack. I ate it all. Our hotel is that upper left in pink. The yeah, and again, you see the color code, and they're just everything's so snuggled and tucked in. It's just someone's home. You know, again, just right off the beaten, right off your way. The steps holding up well. This was the day that killed the calves. Down, 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 down. This was the first day for Ravello, but if you know Escher, hi Hollywood. No problem. Here. Here's your special snack. This is where the artist Escher lived, and you got seen.
No
Oh,
wonder.
wow.
Yeah. Answers a lot.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay. And then feral cats and dogs, so sad. Yeah. That some are fed in town, but some of them fend for themselves on the mountain. You know, the one on the left was much more skitsy than this nice cuddly one on the right.
Yeah, she had a home sometime.
Yeah. Then they have this custom that was charming of building little miniature towns or little tableaus right into the side of the road or on a pathway.
For the cats.
And they're often lit up with nativity scenes at Christmas time. They might have characters or people, local townspeople in some of them, but you saw them in a lot of places. Here's another artist that had done that.
Wow.
And here's another one. Each one different. But charming. And then the ceramics, of course, are gorgeous. But all that low fire glaze, very similar to this. This is on a bigger scale, but many examples. And then the boats. Again, this is looking straight down. You see the arch on the left That's the main road going by, and there's a big ravine there where these boats come in. The nets I showed you earlier, and the harbor. Gelato. And a quick shot of espresso for second wind. And the lemons, there's lemons everywhere.
So in that little town with those winding paths and the guys with the donkey and, you know, are there a lot of vehicles? It doesn't look like there are roads for vehicles.
There are some, the cantilever up
Yeah.
the hillside, but much of it is stairways.
Stairways straight up and down.
Yeah, winding down through.
How do they get things in?
Yeah,
Well,
how do
you-
you get your groceries home, right?
So you take your, you know, you go on your
Yeah.
Now you walk.
switchbacks,
Right.
and then you'd go down your
Or little path.
right. I love that in this one frame, we've got colorful produce, ceramics, tourist art with some seashells, and someone's laundry. You know, and more of that, everything just, so much humanity tucked in so many little nooks and crannies. And this kind of thing we saw a lot, many people who had, you know, gardens just beginning. Those three different regions, but all on Amalfi Coast. There's your happy girl. And
When did you go again?
last April, during
April.
April school vacation. Now, this one is, this is another way to, experience, you know, it's another, whereas these have been Google slideshows, this is another software that I played with, a way to share hiking the Amalfi Coast, Italy. Can you say vertigo? Let's see. So pictures from the trails, and you can hover over them and get little captions. So, and you've heard about some of them already because I've shown you them earlier, but it's a neat way to see a different presentation. Always going higher, it seemed. And that's Amalfi, that town, from a much higher up distance. This one, there's, I think, another image of that, but that kind of trail going off in two directions. The slope. Yeah. We climbed down to this place through all these vegetation and buildings. I mean, down, 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 and then had some lemonade down at the bottom.
Did you then go up, 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 up?
Yeah. This picture right here, my daughter lifted this off Facebook and turned it into a piece of fabric. Some of you have seen it, that has mirror images. Very fun. But this is now this is a video of what I hope will work. This is at the Convent Dominica on our hike at the Amalfi Coast. I'm hoping this will work because it does a good job of conveying. I'm talking, you can't hear that, but that's okay.
Deep.
Yeah.
It's like Thailand.
On the, you know, you're seeing also on that far side the trail that we had just come up. We had just been at that lower place. She's just said hola, and I've corrected her because I'm trying to not have her speak in Spanish, so it won't pollute my Italian. It's funny. And then it ends with some rosemary and other dried vegetation. But that gives you an idea of how steep it is.
Could you smell the rosemary?
Yes.
Oh my
You
gosh.
could also smell oregano. You could smell marjoram. You know, there were some.
You had all those hills to climb. 'Cause
There's some real familiar friends that were there. You know, alyssum growing everywhere. You know, just cyclamen, the house plant cyclamen in the woodland, like very common house plants, but growing there. So yeah, I mentioned that wild thyme, oregano, mint, and rosemary, and this house and gardens just cantilevered over the edge like that.
Oh my God.
And then our last hike through a woodland area into a canyon.
Is this an area that ever gets snow?
Yes. does.
You just
And
push it down.
This one is interesting because these dogs, there's about 15 dogs right behind that fence, all, and there's a hermit that lives there with his girlfriend. And she's probably, she looked much younger than him. And there's this big story about the hermit that was kind of fun. It was just sort of scary but fun. And that was that last hike. So that I thought was of interest as one way to tell a story. And then another one is this one, which is another, it's sort of like for an English class or another way to do a narrative. This is with the sponge is the name of this. And so you've heard a lot of what I am talking about here. Fighting off Chef Lad, visiting Villa Ruffalo and Villa Cimbrone. Cimbrone is the one that's so famous with movie stars, whose name escapes me right now, but Wagner, took, the opera took place there. And it's just I kind of liked this as a way to tell a story. And I'm sparing you the captions because some of them you've heard already. I like that picture because that's one vine. They climbed all over this little courtyard from just one vine. Then day 2, that was day 1. Day 2, and going into the hills. That's the lemonade stand. I'm not sure why this is so small right now. Frankly, it came out much bigger. It maybe has something to do with.
Did you plan the hiking yourself?
Yes and no. Oh, by the way, we went into the mountains and we stayed at an agriturismo,
Oh, cool.
a B&B where they grow their own food there.
Wow.
And this is the lady in the center. She was just lovely, and that just was a nice idea that you can do that. We met our guide at the beginning of each day over breakfast, and he gave us a color Xerox of places along the trail that we might be looking for. Hi. And for those of you who don't know, this is my husband, Dave. I was going to say, do you know this man?
He wasn't in any of the photos.
So I'm not sure who was that?
I was asking about how the trip got planned.
So they have photographs of places along the trail that you hope to see. Sometimes it was really dicey. Is this what we're looking? Does this look like this? I think he had photographed like a few months earlier, because they don't often, vegetation looks different, for example. But we'd start our day with this, then he'd say goodbye and off we'd go. And we would have a combination of using this and our maps, particularly those, either that or that, and we were always figuring out where to go. So it was that really lent itself to an adventure. And we eventually figured out how to use the bus system, which so twice we chickened out and didn't finish the last leg because we were exhausted, and we did take a bus with no shame, but that was after hiking for 5 or 6 hours and being exhausted. And most of it was funny because I think that the locals, it must have been a thing for them to undermine how difficult it was. They always said like 2 or 3 hours less than what it took us.
After a while.
I didn't think you were really going to hike it.
They were in so much better shape than those Americans showing up.
Becky,
Yes.
did you find that locals did hike?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Like it wasn't just like you go to work, you come home, you do your thing, but that locals actually did
Yeah.
hike and go. Because sometimes we don't hike.
Yeah.
Right, we live
so
here
I was
and-
wondering,
Yeah.
like, you found that was just what people
No,
did?
I felt like that because when we'd run into people, some of the people we ran into did not strike me as tourists from other parts of Italy. They struck me as locals in some cases. So I can't answer that, you know, with
Yeah.
certainty, but that did occur to me. Okay, so the last one is the botany one, and if you want to see that, I'll just keep going. I'm so happy that technology is being reasonably cooperative.
Don't jinx anything.
I was just
I know.
gonna say that, really.
Say it all. Thank you guys for hanging in there with us. So, let's see, here and here, okay. And this is what I would do for Jen,
Yeah.
the Jens.
Oh, yeah.
It's a Mediterranean climate, right by the coast, snuggled right up there. Really strange conifer needles. Can you see that?
Mhm.
How odd they are, they're like tubes.
Yeah,
It's
but
straight
a
up.
beautiful statue.
Yeah. It's compatible with formal gardens.
Is that Capri?
No, this is Ravello. This is the Villa Cimbrone. You can see Wagner doing an opera right here, can't you? And it's also with a mountainous shrub setting. You can see there's a little home tucked up in there. Cintranthus ruber, Jupiter's beard, grown as a perennial here. There it is in the wild. That's one of my favorite parts about travel is identifying things that are, you know, annuals or ornamental here, but here's where they come from. And vineyards, a lot of this mountainous shrub materials. This is Sweet Alyssum,
Oh,
you
just
know, an old.
growing there.
Yes, exactly. Same one here. And Corydalus, the Corydalus is really different with the little, it's white with little burgundy tips. We're used to the pink and yellow variety for the most part here. There's a yellow one here, but I've never seen one like that. The borage family, you know, the Victorians would put this in tea, those little,
Or salad.
yes, exactly. And then hellebores or Lenten rose on the left, that's a relative of it. The leaves are much thinner than our wide ones. And it's sort of a chartreuse green color, but look at the crew top on that ridge, and look at that ridge for that matter. It's like a pumpkin-shaped mountain. And there are some trees that haven't leafed out yet, but there they are
They're right
on
up
the
there.
ridge. It's sort of odd. And then rosemary drifts, just gobs and gobs of rosemary. And then this little blue one I knew from travels in California many years ago, but it's in the desert there. That Anagallus monalia, and then this little succulent down below. That I don't know the name, Sanseviera maybe, but the nickname is Wandering Jew, the purple plant there. And again the cyclamen in the lower right. Sweet little wildflowers, just a whole array.
Yep.
And en route to the chestnut forest, like chestnut trees that get harvested, chestnuts or for the wood. So now we're in like a temperate forest. The bulbs for like fundraisers, sometimes they'll sell windflowers or anemones. Here are the windflowers and anemones in their woodland setting.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and that upper right, though the light isn't as good, there, you know, if you looked up close, there's lots of pink little dots, it's the cyclamens. That one on the left looks like kind of the Jack in the Pulpit thing, but
Yeah, it
it's
does.
a ginger family. And that one up in the upper right, like a spurge. That one on the far left, that's a wild garlic.
Oh.
And then the bottom right, maidenhair fern, you know, a greenhouse plant.
Right.
A fussy greenhouse plant. These are, the bottom is a trunk that's lying horizontal, and coming out of the trunk are a new generation of trees going straight up. Levens. I don't believe there were so many of them, so many places, it was odd that we didn't take more pictures of it, but, and these are all, you know, different places on the Amalfi Coast where that treatment of the green, netting for its greenhouse and protection attributes were displayed. That's Mount Vesuvius beyond, and the road there is a dirt road, but it's all gray dirt, and it's gray because of the ash, and it's fertile because of that as well. And that was interesting to see that vineyard right there. There's also little dots of red, like poppy-like flowers in there. So, from the vineyard to cheers. And that's it.
Wait, you gotta speak some Italian for us, Becky.
Oh, molto bene.
Invite us to eat.
What's that?
Invite us to eat.
I know, it's so hard, like, what do you say?
I know. No, I worry about how much I've lost from not using it. But I had definitely was thinking in it, wouldn't you say, too? And
We practiced for months before you left.
yes, and I use it a lot, and once there I did too, and I think that my accent got good enough, perhaps from doing Pimsleur language tapes by myself in the car. Someone said that if you were here for another 2 months, you'd be speaking Italian. So I do want to figure out a way to live there for a year at some point, and I do want to go back. I want to go back with a school trip if I can figure out a way to do that. And I'm sort of laying low and germinating thoughts about that. I know I've
Well, it
talked
could
to you
certainly
about
be
that.
like connected with PE and wellness somehow,
Yeah.
you know?
I'd like to,
How
Sicily
lifestyle-
is also appealing to me because I think they're very sensitive to tourism and the effects of